Hi, I'm Laura.
And I'm Joe.
And this is CrimeDivers.
Hello everybody, welcome to today's episode.
Hello everyone, welcome back to CrimeDivers. So Jill, where in the world are we?
We're in the UK.
And your title?
Murder Above the Butcher Shop.
Okie dokie. Shall we just dive in?
Yeah, let's dive in. So as I said, we're in the UK and the year is 2003.
Okay.
So Audrey and Eric Hingston were both widowed when they met in 1985 and they married the same year as they met. So I'll just give you the tiniest little bit of background that I've got. So when he was 18, Eric got his pilot's licence and he joined the RAF. He was part of a special operations group during World War II, which flew covert missions into occupied France, which was obviously really dangerous. But his family were like really proud of him because obviously, well, you would be, wouldn't you?
Of course, yeah, totally.
In 1950, Eric married his first wife, Jean, and they had 2 children together. After the war ended, Eric became a butcher and he owned 3 shops in the St Austell area, which is in Cornwall. So unfortunately, his wife passed away in 1982, and Eric moved to Plymouth and he opened a butcher shop in a place called Plympton. So Plympton is a suburb of the city of Plymouth, which is in Devon in England.
Okay.
So Plympton is a tight-knit community with low crime rates and, you know, everybody looks out for each other. In 1985, as I said, Audrey and Eric got together. So they'd already been friends when their partners were alive, and their friendship blossomed after they were both widowed.
Okay.
And they got married. So Eric was 62 and Audrey was 60 when they got married.
See, you're never too old to find love.
Well, exactly, I know. So they like to travel abroad, like they would go into the city centre for a coffee and like just kind of look around the shops together. Like Audrey was really fit for her age and she was like really sociable. They had an active life and they both enjoyed it, you know, they were just loving life, spending time with each other. You know, it just sounds lovely.
Yeah, it does.
So Audrey and Eric retired, and Eric's son took over the butcher shop. And Eric and Audrey, they both still lived in the flat above the shop.
Right, okay.
So everyone knew them as, obviously, being the local butcher. And he still went to the pub regularly. And as I said before, you know, they were just always out and about together. So everybody knew them.
Yeah.
But when Eric turned 80, his health took a severe downturn. All of a sudden, he had like heart problems, he was asthmatic, he had to get a catheter, and he had a hip replacement. He couldn't drive anymore, so he got rid of his car, and his social life was basically just non-existent.
Oh, what a shame.
Audrey became his full-time carer, so for both of them, their lives were just completely different. You know, they'd been used to just getting up and going, and basically they were kind of quite housebound now.
I should say they wouldn't have been able to go out all the places that they've been going before.
Yeah. Yeah, they said they used to go out for drives in the car and, you know, just spontaneously, like, let's go for a coffee, we'll just take a wander into town.
Yeah, but so that
they couldn't do that, yeah.
Away from them, yeah.
But they still had plenty of plans for the future, but these had to be put on hold. You know, they were obviously hoping that Eric would be able to kind of
get a bit better.
Get a bit of his life back, you know, and sort of his health back and still be able to go and do some things.
Yeah.
But Eric and Audrey seemed determined to make the best of things. You know, they would get out locally as often as they could. Even if it was just for a short walk, like in the neighbourhood. Neighbours said they would always say hello and, you know, they were a lovely couple. So on Friday the 29th of August 2003, at 3:45am, Audrey called 999. And she told the operator that intruders had broken into their flat and had stabbed her husband, Eric.
Oh, God.
So the emergency services responded immediately. Detective Chief Inspector Tony Carney was the senior investigating officer on duty that night. As soon as he got there, he looked at the Hingston's front door and noticed there was no signs of forced entry. So he knocked and Audrey answered the door and she was like really confused and shocked. Well, obviously your husband's just been stabbed. DCI Carney said she was just this little old lady who was confused, upset and frightened, and he said he just felt so sorry for her and just wanted to get her away from the crime scene as soon as possible. So paramedics had already gotten there within a few minutes, but unfortunately it was already too late.
Oh, so he died.
Yeah, when DCI Carney went into the room, he said Eric had been killed by a downward thrust from a long, sharp bladed instrument, and there wasn't a lot of blood at all.
Oh, right.
So Eric was lying on the floor, his head was on a cushion, which I thought that was strange at first. That's what he's saying, he thought it was strange at first. And then he saw patches on the floor and he realised that Eric had been defibrillated. I knew I was going to have a problem saying that. And what they hadn't realised, the paramedics, was that Eric had a pacemaker.
Right.
So when the heart stops beating, the pacemaker kicks in to try and start it again, and it gives a sort of false pulse.
Right.
And this is what the paramedics had picked up. So they therefore thought that there was still life in Eric and tried to resuscitate him because of the pacemaker. They didn't realise he was actually already gone, which kind of comes into effect later. I'll explain about that later.
Right.
So DCI Carney tried to find out as much as he could from Audrey about what had happened. He said that she was kind of leaning forward, like sort of cringing and like confused, frightened, and she was not absolutely coherent. So she said that her and Eric had different separate bedrooms.
Right.
And she said that she'd been sleeping in her room and she'd heard a noise. So she'd got up and went into Eric's room and two men were in there. As soon as they saw her, they escaped through the window and they left a black bin liner which had items in it that they must have been intending on stealing. So Audrey was taken by the family liaison officer to her son's house. He was a retired detective sergeant and he lived in the city with his family. Obviously she needed support, but the other reason they wanted her out of the flat was because unintentionally she could have well contaminated the scene, and disturbed any evidence that there might have been. So police arrived at the flat to search for any evidence left by the burglars that Audrey had seen. The forensic team cordoned off the building and they got to work. So it looked like a typical burglary scene. The wardrobe doors were open, like drawers were left open, contents thrown all over the place. The black bin liner that Audrey told officers about was by the window, which had items in it. There was like some jewellery and just bits and bobs. So the window had been open, so that would have been an easy way to escape because like under the window there was like a flat roof extension,
right?
Which had like a felt roof cover. So even though they were in a flat, it would have been easy to like jump out the window onto the extension and then down to the ground. So Eric, he had a medical condition which caused him breathing difficulties and he would often sleep upright in bed and with the window open, and you could see from the street that the window was opening outward. So it would be easy to get into.
Which could have explained the reason why the front door hadn't been forced in, I suppose.
Yeah, what the police have said was that the burglars would have placed a ladder on top of the wheelie bin. I don't know why they would have put it on top of the wheelie bin. Why could they not just put it on the ground? Like maybe was it not big enough?
Maybe it wasn't long enough, yeah.
Yeah, I just thought it was a bit specific.
Yeah.
That it was a wheelie bin. I thought, but a wheelie bin has wheels.
Unless it's one of those big, if it's a flat, it might be like a big, big massive bin. You know how you get the big massive...
yeah. The ones that are like a communal...
Yeah, like a communal one,
sort of
big bin.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
I was just thinking of the single ones that we have. Like,
yeah, but maybe it's different. Maybe, I say if it's been a flat, it might have been like a bigger one.
Yeah, maybe. But yeah, they would have put the ladder on top of that, climbed onto the flat roof and climbed in the window from there straight into Eric's bedroom, which is actually really scary, isn't it? That's pretty terrifying that could happen.
Totally.
So, burglars breaking into a house when people are asleep is rare, but burglars breaking into a house and murdering somebody in the house is even rarer, and Eric's bedroom light was on. So you would think that would deter somebody from breaking in, as they would think that the person was awake.
Yeah, because I suppose most burglars try to do it when there's no one in the house.
And when the house is in darkness.
Yeah, exactly. Because they obviously don't want to get caught or, be disturbed by doing it. So you'd think that if they had, I don't know if most burglars do their research where they scout the house or whatever, but they would choose to do it at a time when there isn't anybody in. I mean, especially if I suppose it seems quite an easy way to get in the house. And if the window's open, maybe they would do that, but it does seem quite...
Yeah, it would seem quite strange just because
isn't that,
the light was on.
Yeah, isn't that why a lot of people leave their lights on in the houses, to deter people from...
Well, exactly.
I mean, I know when we've been on holiday, we've got Alexa lights, and obviously we set timers on them so the lights come on now and again.
That's funny that. I was actually going to say our neighbours across the road, when they go away, I always notice that they have timers on their lights that they go, but I actually kind of noticed that they went on at stupid times the last time they did it, so they maybe need to check it.
Yes, check it. So, just...
But yeah, that's what the point of having these automatic light things
so I think the point being is that I think most burglaries wouldn't happen necessarily if there was, like, thought that there's people in the house and there was lights on. But then, I don't know, maybe it's not for every case. But...
So police were confused by that, basically what we've just said.
Yeah.
And also the fact that Eric was an elderly man who by now was... well, I don't think he was completely bedridden, but he was...
He certainly wasn't getting up in a hurry.
Yeah, exactly. He was spending a lot of time sitting down, lying down, whatever. So it's not like he would have been able to put up much of a fight.
Mobility wouldn't have been very good.
So why would they kill him? There wouldn't be any reason to kill him as he wasn't a physical threat.
No.
And although they did realise that they thought, well, maybe the reason for murdering him was because he would be able to identify them later, because if these burglars were local,
you think, obviously I know we don't know, but they might have had masks on or something, so again...
Well, they're just kind of thinking of reasons why they might have killed them, so that's one of them, that maybe they didn't have masks on and that he could have identified them, that's them just trying to... Just try to figure it out.
To find what's happened.
Yeah, like why...
Try to rationalise in their head.
Why would they kill this man?
Yeah.
Basically, because, there has to be a motive for it, doesn't there?
What do you think?
Well, yeah. We did do a case when it was that I did murder without motive, when the guy killed his dad and they just...
There was no reason for it.
Well, there maybe was, but he wasn't telling anybody what his reason was.
There was no obvious reason.
Yeah. Anyway. So by the following morning, the community knew that it had been a murder. There was a press... Sorry, I just bit my tongue. A press conference was held and everyone was terrified. There was 2 killers on the loose. So murders in Plymouth are rare enough, but stranger murders are incredibly rare. So for something like this to happen, and to happen to an older man who's so well known to everybody, it caused shockwaves. Nobody could believe it, because he was just a friendly butcher. Everybody knew him, and he was just a nice friendly guy. I always think of butchers as being jolly.
Yeah.
A jolly... What is there? Is there something that's a jolly butcher?
I don't know, but I think it's just in the past when you've seen maybe...
Oh, in the butcher shops. In our local one, did they not have a statue?
Yeah.
And it was a guy and he had a bit of a belly.
Yeah.
And he was just a jolly, cheerful butcher.
You're probably right, that's exactly where it's come from.
Probably.
I'm sure not all butchers are like that. But
no, I know, but I think that's just where I've kind of got I just imagine the local butcher as being somebody really friendly who knows everybody who comes in and out. When I've been into a butcher, the guy's always been friendly.
Well, you'd hope so, because he wants your business.
This kind of thing just didn't happen there, So the following day, Audrey said that she was able to give a detailed description of the 2 intruders. So she said she had managed to get a good look at them before they realised she was there. And they took off. So she said that one of them had a very distinctive appearance. He was just over 6 foot tall. He was wearing a deerstalker hat. And he had white trousers on, which it's a bit brave wearing white trousers.
Who wears white trousers these days? That's not very common, is it? Especially a man.
I was thinking maybe in the summertime, maybe sort of cropped trousers.
But still,
to go burglaring with.
I know, you would think they would have dark clothes on. Normally.
But yeah, and she said that she'd actually seen him before, round about the village a few times. She said the other man was shorter, maybe about 5'8", and he was stocky, and they were both young. And Audrey agreed to give a press conference. By this time, the story was nationwide, so there was loads of reporters, local and nationwide, crammed in this small room. And Audrey arrived with her son, and she gave a statement on the 1st of September 2003.
So it seems a bit crazy, how obviously we were trying to understand why they killed him. And he wasn't very mobile, not a threat, but yet she was mobile and maybe more of a threat, but why didn't they kill her?
Well, the way that she said it is that she obviously disturbed them, gave them a fright, and they ran. Don't know. But I watched, there's a clip of her at the press conference, and she looks devastated. And fighting back the tears, she said quote, during the early hours of Friday morning, 2 men came into my home and ruined my life. My husband Eric did not deserve this. As a frail man, any resistance he put up could easily have been overcome by these 2 young men. There was no need for them to go to the lengths they did, end quote. The room was like so quiet, like you could hear a pin drop. And like, apparently this doesn't happen very often, like speaking to someone who had been there when something so terrible had happened. Like, yeah, you have press conferences, obviously, but, you know, maybe when somebody's gone missing or something like that and they're appealing. But, like, for somebody to actually sort of be there when there's been a murder, apparently that's quite rare. So, like, everybody was, like, really...
I was going to say, my episode's got that.
Oh, has it? All right, okay. So... Well, maybe it's... not so rare.
Maybe not.
I don't know, because I'm just going by what I researched. She continued, quote, somebody somewhere knows who did this. I ask them, and my family ask them, to please contact the police. On a personal note, may I thank you for all the love and kindness you have shown us, but please do anything you can to help us. Thank you, end quote. So, the description of the killers was circulated around the media, and obviously it was like the lead story on like all the front pages of the newspapers and like the news on the TV and stuff. And with all the public attention focused on these suspects, there was a result almost immediately. So 2 young men actually came forward voluntarily, as Audrey has basically just described them. So she described these 2 men, and like, so they came forward and said that it's us, and they were arrested. So when the press.
I thought you were going to say police.
No. Maybe it was a mixture of police and press. I don't know. When the press were told that arrests had been made, everyone like obviously like sighed, you know, breathed a sigh of relief. Unfortunately, that relief turned out to be short-lived when police questioned the 2 men. So inquiries were made into their background, and they just didn't fit the profile at all of a burglar or of anybody who might have committed this type of offence. They were staying at a bail hostel, which was within half a mile or so of the Hingston's flat. Police looked closely at the opportunity that the 2 guys might have, but the bail hostel assured them that in accordance with their terms and their procedures, there was no way that these men would have been out at this time of night.
So why the hell did they come forward to say that it was them?
Because she described them, so they came forward. Because the police would have found them anyway, so they came forward.
Okay.
You'll see.
Okay.
So, and their records showed that, you know, as I said, like, they were in the hostel. So after being interviewed, the men were released. So police were obviously disappointed and a bit confused as to why Audrey had identified these 2 men, as they clearly couldn't have been responsible.
Right.
She would have seen them around that area quite a lot, as there was a pub and a pasty shop next to the butcher's, which they used quite often. So she would have seen them. She would have,
So
they would have been familiar to her.
Remembered them.
So police figured that she must have seen the 2 men earlier that day. And when she described the killers, she was like in shock and probably a bit confused, and you know, that's why. So after that, the trail went cold. And everyone was wondering if these people were ever going to get caught. Everyone was talking about it. Like, everybody was on edge. Like, because, you know, who knew if they were going to strike again?
Well, exactly. It's always a fear, isn't there?
If they're going to murder, an elderly, frail man.
Who could be next?
Yeah, exactly. So police were working round the clock. And despite the media appeals, there were still no leads. So something didn't seem right. The police were looking at a burglary gone wrong, and they thought it was strange that they didn't find any signs of fingerprints or even glove marks on any of the furniture or the drawers that had been ransacked. Forensics found nothing of strange fingerprints or scenes of crime marks at all. As there had been a struggle, police hoped that Eric's killers may have left their DNA on or around his body, but as I said before, I'd talk about the paramedics, but the paramedics created a problem there. Like, obviously, it wasn't their fault, but they would have been, like, breathing over him, talking over him, touching him. Fibres from their clothes might have fallen onto him, and that would have contaminated any type of DNA or fibre evidence that the offenders might have left on him. So
I think to myself, does that not happen in most crime scenes then? Because potentially, obviously, paramedics are initially called to try and save the person, So they would be doing stuff over them to help them. So that
I see what you're saying, but I have a response for that.
Oh, okay.
There will probably be other DNA evidence, though.
True.
That, yes, it could be contaminated, but round about the rest of the house, there probably will be fingerprints and other evidence, but here there isn't. So any evidence that they could have just got from him was contaminated. But in other cases, that it might be contaminated from the paramedics touching the body, but they might have other DNA evidence or forensic evidence.
Always going to be a risk in every crime scene that,
of course.
they attend, because like they're not just going to stand there and go, oh no, we need to wait for you to dust for fingerprints, but this person's just dying here, so
of course
they're going to obviously be right in there, aren't they?
Yeah, so as I said, like, it was not their fault at all. They did what they had to do. But, you know, as I said, that's something that they just have to risk. So obviously it took them some time to obtain the uniforms and the DNA samples from the paramedics. But once the police lab had managed to identify and separate the traces left by the medical team there was still no forensic evidence of the offenders inside or outside the flat.
Right.
There was no disturbance under the window that they would have climbed through. There was no signs of entry, no dirt, no gravel. You know, it just didn't look right. And even if they'd been wearing gloves, there still would have been some marks left. You would have been able to see where they've sort of pulled themselves into the room, because they obviously would have to hold on to like the windowsill or whatever. You would also expect them to leave traces or fibre from their clothing, but there was nothing. So by the 11th of September, Audrey's family were saying that they felt that something wasn't right, and they felt that Audrey was holding something back. So the police then began to change the focus of their investigation, and they began to look at Audrey as a suspect.
That's where my thinking's going.
So none of them had considered her before, as it just seemed unbelievable. She was 81. She was small, and she just looked like someone's granny. You know, like just...
I've heard this before.
Yeah, well, if you're a Patreon, then you maybe would have been thinking, that sounds familiar, because we did the case of Dorothy Puente, and she just looked like somebody's granny as well, but she was actually a murderer.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly.
But the police just couldn't find any evidence of a break-in, so they had to consider the possibility that she knew more than what she was letting on. So, but before the police could pay Audrey a visit to find out more, she shocked everyone by attempting suicide.
Oh. Okay.
So, she took an overdose and she left a note. The note said, "Please catch these terrible people who ruined my life. I cannot live without Eric." However, she was unsuccessful at the suicide, and she was detained in Derriford Hospital. And the police were like, kind of like, was this a real attempt at suicide, or was it just a ploy to act like the grieving widow who couldn't live without her husband? You know, to throw them off her trail.
Yeah, especially with what she left in her suicide note as well.
So she had been treated for depression by her GP since June of that year. So they did realise that it could have been a real attempt. But I think they were like, we're a bit suspicious here.
Yeah.
So while she was recovering in hospital, detectives were unable to interview her, but they discreetly continued to investigate whether she was connected to Eric's death and not the burglars that she'd claimed. And bearing in mind that Audrey's son was an ex-police officer, they had to make sure that the information didn't leak out of the police station. You know, they were doing it discreetly.
Of course, yeah.
So the police said that they had to turn the negative aspects of the lack of forensic evidence into a positive, which is why they decided to reconstruct the alleged entrance to the premises. So they got a couple of police officers to break into the flat through the window, like Audrey had said that the burglars had done. And the police, they weren't surprised to find that they could not do it without leaving any trace. Bearing in mind, they tried to break in without leaving any trace of forensic evidence.
And
so they were being extra careful, and they still did it. So, you know, that kind of reinforced all beliefs that a burglary was pretty much impossible.
Yeah, it didn't happen.
So, even though they had carried out a search of the flat right after the murder, they carried out another search, and they found a 7-inch long butcher's knife down the side of a kitchen drawer, which must have been missing the first time round. So, but remember, the first time round, they weren't looking at her as a suspect, you know. Like,
so they probably didn't look too in depth.
Yeah, I think so. I'm assuming that's the case. So Eric's post-mortem examination revealed that the cause of death was a single stab wound by a long, sharp, bladed instrument, which had been forced down past his collarbone, puncturing his lung, which had collapsed, and considering his state of health at the time, that had led to his death. Mm-hmm. So police found traces of blood on the blade, which were later forensically examined. DNA came back as Eric's, and there were fingerprints on the knife, which were Audrey's. Mm-hmm. And strangely enough, just the week before the murder, Audrey had asked her stepson, James, the guy who runs the butcher shop, to sharpen that knife for her.
Oh.
Funny that.
I wonder why.
Because obviously she needed it.
Oh, no, but I wonder like, if he asked her why she wanted that.
Well, people need their knife sharpened. Sometimes I get John to sharpen our knives. Do you not sharpen your knives? You don't, do you?
I've bought new knives.
Obviously, in this family, Laura's the one who has more money than Jill, so she just goes and buys new knives.
I think I'd had those knives a good few years before I bought new knives, so they were probably blunt for quite a long time as well, to be fair, but I did buy new knives.
Well, it's not something that I do regularly, obviously, but in the past, like, John has sharpened knives.
I remember at Mum and Dad's house, they had a sharpener on the wall, didn't they?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, see, so you're just obviously the oddball in our family, probably. Like, because obviously my parents
sharpened their
knives as well. I just said my parents.
Our
parents, yes, sorry. So, yeah, maybe just didn't think anything. Because in the butcher shop, they're going to have a knife sharpener in the butcher shop, aren't they? Because obviously they're going to be using knives. Mm-hmm. So he maybe didn't think anything of it. Just like, all right, okay, the knife needs sharpened. Fair enough.
Yes, it is.
And you have to remember, like, you know, his dad was a butcher. I don't know if she helped out in the butcher shop, so they would have been used to like sharpening knives and things like that. So
probably not out of the ordinary.
Yeah. So now they had the murder weapon. So on the night of Eric's death, Audrey had called 999 at 3:45 a.m. to report the attack. But police found a delivery driver who delivered some goods to the butcher shop at about 2 a.m. and he remembered hearing some groaning noises like somebody was in pain coming from one of the upstairs windows.
Right.
So Eric must have been stabbed just before that time.
Oof, and she's not phoned an ambulance straight away then.
Exactly. So after the post-mortem, police got more information about the likely time of death as well, and it was a lot earlier than that call to 999. So it was all pointing to Audrey murdering Eric. Then before, you know, so obviously it looks like she's murdered him. Then before calling 999, she's went opening drawers, scattering content, to make it look like a burglary, and, you know, she's filled a bin liner with some stuff. And she was possibly doing this while Eric was lying on the floor, still alive, and in a hell of a lot of pain. Oh, you know, if this guy's heard
groaning,
the groaning obviously hasn't died straight away, if that was the case, that's when he'd been stabbed. So he could be lying there on the floor, or in his bed, sorry. Or, no, he was on the floor, wasn't
he? Yeah, he was on the floor.
Groaning and in pain, and she's just going about making it look like a burglary. I mean, that's harsh. That's
quite twisted.
That's cold, isn't it?
Very cold.
So there were still a lot of officers who just couldn't accept the fact that Audrey was a suspect. They just couldn't believe that this little old lady could do something so horrendous. But as we know, anybody, you know, like, doesn't matter what you look like.
No, exactly.
You know, there isn't a particular way you should look, like a murderer should look.
I know you can be a murderer at any age, any
gender, any...
Well,
just anybody.
Anybody, yeah. I mean, just because somebody doesn't typically look like a murderer doesn't mean they're not capable of it. Clearly.
Exactly, and, you know, as we've pointed out before, this, you know, Eric was frail. He was basically kind of bedridden, and you know, so it wouldn't have been hard for a little old 81-year-old, and she was fit.
Yeah, it's not like she would have had to overpower him. I could understand if maybe it was some like fit younger person that was maybe well built or whatever, and then there was a frail that could put up a fight. Then you might really not believe that, but I mean, in his condition, like you say, it probably wouldn't have taken a lot.
Yeah. So social workers visited Audrey in the hospital to talk to her, and they came back to the police and said something's not right. She wasn't
exhibiting.
Yep, that word. Any signs? I should have just said she wasn't showing.
Yeah.
I was trying to sound posh.
You're not posh.
She wasn't showing any signs of loss or grief, and the social workers and Audrey's family had picked up on that. And remember, her son's an ex-police officer. Like, he's gonna.
I was gonna say he should probably be quite well trained to pick up.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, maybe it was him that kind of was the first one who did suspect something.
Maybe.
So on the 7th of October 2003, Audrey was released from hospital and she was arrested on suspicion of Eric's murder. you know, as you can imagine, the community were in shock. No one had ever suspected her.
No.
It wasn't only the police; it was like the whole community.
Yeah.
Not, you know, nobody had. They would just never think that she would kill the love of her life, because that's, well, to everybody else, that's what it was like. You know, the two had met each other late.
Like it was,
they had met each other late on in life, and they loved each other. And
but then now, you know, I've gone back to sort of, you know, about typical murderers. I do believe that anybody's capable of anything in a heat of a moment. If I mean, if there is a heat of a moment, you know what I mean?
Well, I don't think there was, because she asked for the knife to be sharpened.
No, but I suppose, like, you know, if people are capable of anything if they put their mind to it.
Oh, yeah.
The moment, situations, anything. You might not think that they are, but
Anybody
in a situation, anything can happen.
Yeah, of course. So in her interview at the police station, Audrey wasn't admitting to anything and came up with another explanation.
Okay.
So she decided that Eric must have killed himself. And as a result, she ransacked the flat to make it look like burglary. Because she identified two men that she had seen earlier in that day as being responsible for the crime, because she didn't want to embarrass Eric's family. Because she obviously thought...
Well, the fact that she's just said all that, now, if I was like the police, I would be thinking, well, you've definitely done it now. Because how can you come up with the fact that you think he's killed himself, so you've then ransacked... So you've admitted that there was no burglary.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact is, you're now telling me that this man's now killed himself. Would you not have said that in the first place?
Exactly. She's changed her story. So
so I'm a
to me, that's admitting.
And I'm going,
Yeah.
no, you've done this 100%.
Of course. As soon as Audrey changed her statement to the police, aware that the murder weapon had been identified, her son, the former detective, requested to see his mum in custody. Mm-hmm. Apparently it's not common, but the officers thought it might be useful, so they allowed it. And it was useful because Audrey told her son that she did kill Eric. Mm-hmm. So she said that she was fed up of caring for Eric. As I said earlier, before Eric's health began to suffer, they had a good life, they were happy, they had a good social life, they would go on holidays, they would go to like local beauty spots on days out, they would go shopping and have meals out, but, you know, all this disappeared and she became depressed.
Right.
So Angela Mutanda, who's a relationship psychologist, said, quote, "Without speaking to Audrey, we don't know what led to her breaking point. She may have felt frustrated, resentful, stressed, distressed, unable to ask for help, feeling that she'd lost her partner, going through in her mind what might have felt like a living bereavement. This is not the future I'd planned. He's become sick instead of going out and enjoying ourselves. You know, he can't do what I hoped he could do with me." And that sense of frustration might have been bottled up until she finally blew.
Which,
end quote.
I totally get all that. Like, I appreciate all that. Mm-hmm. But it still doesn't excuse you to go and murder somebody at the end of the day. I mean,
no.
I get, like, the whole frustration.
Yeah, of course.
You know,
I mean...
You obviously have planned to do all these things, and now you're caring for your sick husband, and...
That wasn't... how you imagined it to be.
If you're quite a social person and you're out and about, I totally understand that would have an effect on your mental health. Of course.
But I'm sure there's millions of people living in this world that's happened to, because that's what happens. People get old, people get sick, you know, and...
Exactly. I mean, things don't go to
partners
plan.
Look after each other, and...
So, all that I totally appreciate.
Of course.
But it still doesn't...
But yeah, you still can't go and murder somebody.
No, exactly.
You need to go and ask for help.
Exactly.
I mean, I know it's, you know, this psychologist said, well, maybe she felt like she couldn't ask for help, but sometimes you just have to.
To me, it sounds like she had some good family around her and stuff. So I mean, I'm sure they could have helped out to let her, you know, even just to go and do stuff with her and stuff. You know, like take her out for lunch, out for coffee, etc. That sort of stuff. So, you know.
Yeah, you think that, like, you know, maybe somebody could come and sit with Eric while she went out, you know.
Well, exactly.
So if she felt, there's
obviously a million different ways to deal with it.
Of course.
Murder is not the answer.
That's not the answer. I mean, as I said, we can appreciate everything that she was feeling.
Yeah.
We can appreciate all that, but murder's never the answer.
No, exactly. And from what you said before, I mean, and it was obviously housebound mostly, but they were still getting out for short walks and stuff by the time.
Yeah.
So I know that's not still what she maybe envisaged for her life, but, you know, she could have at least appreciated that part of it, of what they could do, and then get the family to help out so she could do more stuff as well. You know? I mean, as we know, there's definitely far better answers than...
Yeah, I mean, and we're not in that situation, and we didn't know them, and obviously, so what we say is just kind of like, it's our opinions, you know, but yeah, all I can kind of say is, again, murder's never the answer. To us, there is a million other things that she could have done.
Well, because the thing is, I mean, if she was going through all those feelings about her life not being the way that she wants it to be, not being able to do the things she wants to do, the fact that she's murdered somebody and potentially is going to end up in prison, then she's obviously more so not going to be able to do the things that she wants to do. She's not going to have the freedom to go and do things. She's obviously thought she was going to get away with it because she's blamed these two guys, and she's like, look at me, I'm 81 years old. See, like, I mean, obviously I'm not... And I've never been in the mind of a killer, but do they not ever think that there's a good chance they're going to get caught out?
I think a lot of them don't think that. I think they think they're better than that. And as I said, with her, she was just a wee old woman that looked like somebody's granny. Like, she's blaming it on a burglary, made it look like a burglary. And she's like, I'm 81. Like, this is the love of my life. I'm not capable of murder. But I mean, as I said, like the two guys that did come forward, like they weren't admitting to anything. As I said, they came forward, but they weren't. They were just like, she's described us. Yeah, but we've not done anything. Yeah, so that was the case there. So Amelie, I was going to say, that was a mixture of Audrey's family. It was Amelie. I don't know. Audrey's family now knew the truth, but police needed an official record, obviously, of the confession, and this responsibility fell to her son. He was told that they were like, right, we need a statement from you about what your mother's told you. And bless you. He was asked if he was prepared to give a statement, and he was like, yeah, he said, yes, I don't want her looking silly. So I'm assuming what he meant by that was, like, if she was to plead not guilty at trial, she would look silly if they found her guilty. Yeah. So at the end of the day, he's going to, as much as it's his mum, he's going to have that police officer in him where he wants to do the right thing as well. So of course. And, you know, you have to admit, I mean, I don't know what kind of relationship he had with Eric, but that was his stepdad. Yeah. You know, they were family. I mean, assuming that they were close. I mean, they might not have been, I don't know. But anyway, murder's murder. Yeah. You're a police officer. You're obviously going to want your mother to do the right thing. Of course, yeah. Well, anybody would. Most people would. So now Audrey Hingston was formally charged with the murder of her husband, Eric Hingston. So on the 3rd of December 2003, Eric was laid to rest along his first wife, Jean. And I was like, oh, that's actually quite sweet that he was laid to rest beside her, because obviously she wasn't... That's the only reason he wasn't with her, was because she died. Yeah, you know, there was exactly, not as if they'd got divorced or anything like that, and he hadn't murdered her. So 3 months later, on the 12th of March 2004, Audrey appeared at Plymouth Crown Court. She pleaded guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility, which an officer said was because of her age, her history of depression, and the fact that she didn't present any danger to the public. So Eric's family they weren't even there, as they didn't expect it to be over and done with in one day. They were expecting the trial to be lasting like for 2 or 3 weeks. So I think they probably thought that, the first day of trial it'll just be like formal stuff. Which I thought it would have been, yeah. But no, it was over and done with in one day. So, and they weren't happy with the way that the court case went. One of the things that happened as part of the court hearing was that there was a victim impact statement read to the court on behalf of Eric's family. And his son James had gave that statement, but James had given that statement at the time when he thought that Audrey was a victim. Right. Okay. So this statement was fairly sympathetic to Audrey. Yeah. And the work that she had done. You know, he's obviously praising her and looking after Eric and everything like that. But if they'd give a different witness impact statement, because that was his son, his statement would have been nothing like what his original one was, because he was obviously sympathising with his stepmother that looked after. They knew that it should. I don't understand that in the slightest. But yeah, I mean, like if there'd been a different impact statement, then after he'd found out that Audrey had been charged with the murder, the outcome could have been very different. So Audrey was sentenced to 2 years in prison. 2 years? Jesus. At 81, she became the oldest woman to be jailed in Britain. Right. Eric's family were devastated. They felt that the sentence was way too lenient. Same. Totally. And And they did appeal against the sentence to try and get it increased, but they failed.
Wow.
So they feel that they didn't get justice for Eric, and I just don't blame them. Like,
No.
if that was my dad, I'd be, or my family member, I'd be exactly the same.
Exactly. 2 years is nothing.
2 years is nothing.
For killing somebody.
She should have been in prison for the rest of her life. She's 81.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, basically, yeah.
But even worse, she only served 1 year of her sentence, and before she was released, and she died 12 years later in 2016. So she had another 12 years of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's...
Which in some ways makes it sound like she got what she wanted.
She got what she wanted, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? She didn't want to clearly care for him anymore because she'd had enough and she wasn't living the life she wanted to live.
She wanted her freedom.
So she had a year in prison and then got to carry on living a normal life.
Yeah.
Which I think's shocking.
It is.
At the end of the day...
I don't care how old you are.
No.
If you're 81 years old and
You've committed a brutal crime.
Exactly. You intentionally murdered your husband. Mm-hmm. You obviously planned it because you got that knife sharpened.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it could have been coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it could, yeah, actually, just thinking about it, it could have been, that knife maybe did need sharpened. It does happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that just happened to be the murder weapon.
Yeah.
She's maybe snapped.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, but no.
I think
a year in prison.
for that, no.
That's awful. Like, imagine how...
I wouldn't be satisfied with that.
No, his family, like his sons and whatever other family he had, there was no justice whatsoever.
No, absolutely not.
She should have been in prison. She was 81, so she should have been in prison for the rest of her life.
Yeah, exactly.
She should have died in prison. 12 years later, she should have died in prison.
I totally
I'm
agree.
sorry, that's my opinion, but...
Yeah, no, I agree. She served far more than that, because she... Yeah. I've got no more to say on that. I don't agree with it. She should have had a longer sentence. End of.
Okay, so on that note, thanks to everybody for listening. If you would like to follow us on social media, we are on Instagram and Twitter at...
CrimeDivers.
No, it's... Crime underscore...
Oh, sorry. I thought crime underscore divers
underscore pod. I'm sorry. We haven't recorded for, 3 weeks?
Yeah, no, we're so terrible. Our minds are awful, aren't they?
And it's the heat.
I know. Crime underscore divers underscore pod.
Right. Email.
Crime underscore divers underscore pod at outlook.com.
YouTube.
It's Crime Divers podcast.
Yep. Which is Crime Divers is one word and then podcast. Yeah. TikTok.
Crime Divers podcast.
All one word. Are we going to... If you would like to buy us a coffee.
I don't think anyone wants to buy us a coffee, do they?
No, don't want to buy us a coffee. I mean, we have... And she just nearly fell off a chair. In the past, people have bought us coffees. They must have been on good episodes.
Yeah, exactly.
But when an episode like this, they're like, nah.
Yeah.
You don't deserve it.
No.
But anyway, if you would like to, it's buymeacoffee.com/CrimeDivers. If you would like to join us on Patreon, which is just, bonus episodes, early access.
You'll hear another murder about an old lady.
Yeah, you'll hear another murder about an old lady, and a lot more than that.
And a lot more.
I'm not sure how many bonus episodes we've got. I think
There's
maybe about 30 odd, I think we've got by now. So yeah, that's patreon.com/CrimeDivers.
And if you haven't already, please don't forget to subscribe, rate and review.
Maybe don't.
Maybe not on this episode.
Don't judge it on this episode. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.